Gold made the Byzantine Empire wealthy. Everyone accepts this as fact. But gold was never the source of their dominance. Gold existed everywhere in the medieval world. The Arabs controlled vast deposits. The Persians accumulated treasuries full of it. West African kingdoms sat atop reserves so large they warped global markets when their rulers spent it. The Byzantines possessed something more valuable than gold itself. They possessed credibility, and they defended it with the executioner's blade. For 700 years, a single gold coin maintained the same weight, the same purity, the same purchasing power. No government in human history has matched this record. Not Rome at its height, not the British Empire with its global reach, not the United States with its nuclear arsenal and economic machinery. The solidus did not become dominant because Byzantium was rich, wealth flows toward trust. The solidus became the gravitational center of medieval commerce because traders from the Atlantic coast to the Chinese frontier knew its value would not change between the day they received it and the day they spent it. This was not luck. This was not tradition. This was engineered stability backed by institutional violence. The Byzantine monetary system operated on a principle modern economists struggle to accept. Credibility requires constraint. The emperors who ruled Constantinople understood they could print wealth in the short term by reducing the gold content of their coins. Every ruler faces this temptation. The Byzantines made succumbing to it a capital offense. Mint officials who shaved gold from coins faced execution. Counterfeiters died publicly. The empire treated monetary debasement as an act of treason against the state itself. This was not excessive cruelty. This was calculated policy. The Byzantines recognized their currency's credibility sat upstream of their military strength, their diplomatic leverage, and their commercial dominance. You control the money supply, you control the empire. Welcome to Rashi Historical. We follow the money, trace the power, and expose the history they never taught you in school. The solidus collapsed in 1071 CE. Within a generation, a currency stable for 7 centuries lost half its gold content. The empire never recovered. Modern economists study this failure because it answers a question every government today still wrestles with. What breaks an unbreakable currency? The answer reaches directly into your life. Your retirement savings exist as numbers on screens backed by institutional promises. Your government's ability to borrow depends on credibility accumulated over decades. The same structural forces that protected the solidus for 700 years now determine whether your money will hold its value until you need it. The Byzantines wrote the first chapter of monetary policy. Modern central banks are still adding pages to the same book. The year was 309 CE. The Roman Empire was fracturing. Civil wars consumed legions faster than the provinces could supply them. The currency had become worthless. Roman silver coins contained so little actual silver that merchants weighed them rather than counted them. Some refused Roman money entirely, demanding payment in goods. Constantine stood at Trier, in what is now Germany, preparing his campaign for sole control of the empire. He faced a problem more dangerous than his rivals' armies. He could not pay his own soldiers with money they trusted. The Roman denarius had lost 98% of its silver content over the previous century. Emperors facing budget shortfalls had taken the easy path. They reduced the metal content of coins while stamping the same face value on them. Each emperor solved his immediate problem and created a larger one for his successor. By Constantine's time, the accumulated debasement had destroyed public faith in Roman currency. Constantine needed a reset. He needed a coin so pure, so consistent, and so protected by imperial authority that it would become synonymous with value itself. He created the solidus. The specifications were exact. Each coin would contain 4.5 grams of gold at 98% purity. 72 solidi would be struck from 1 Roman pound of gold, no exceptions. No adjustments for military emergencies, no flexibility for budget shortfalls. Constantine did not trust future emperors to maintain these standards voluntarily. He built constraints into the system. Minting became a centralized imperial monopoly. Private production of gold coins carried the death penalty. Imperial inspectors tested random coins from each batch. Mint officials signed their work with identifying marks. If a debased coin was traced back to its origin, the responsible official died. The system inverted normal political incentives. Emperors typically face pressure to spend more than they collect. Debasement offers an invisible tax on currency holders that requires no legislative approval and generates no immediate political backlash. The effects appear years later, displaced from their cause. Constantine made the costs immediate and personal. Any official who weakened the currency faced execution. Any emperor who ordered debasement signaled to the entire commercial world his willingness to cheat. The reputational damage exceeded any short-term budget gain. The solidus entered circulation backed by something stronger than gold reserves. It was backed by the credible threat of state violence against anyone who compromised its integrity. Within 2 generations, the solidus displaced older Roman currencies throughout the Mediterranean. By the 5th century, it had become the standard unit for international trade agreements. Arab merchants demanded it. Persian treasuries accumulated it. Germanic kingdoms measured their wealth in Byzantine gold even as they raided Byzantine territory. The currency outlived the man who created it by 7.5 centuries. The solidus did not maintain itself. Behind the gold coin stood an institutional apparatus designed with a single purpose: prevent debasement at any cost. Constantinople housed the imperial mint. No provincial mints struck gold coins. This centralization eliminated the primary vector for currency corruption. In decentralized systems, distant mint officials face lower supervision and higher temptation. They skim gold knowing inspectors arrive rarely. They dilute purity knowing local merchants lack testing equipment. By the time debased coins reach the capital, identifying the source becomes impossible. The Byzantines closed this vulnerability entirely. All gold coinage flowed from a single controlled point. Imperial officials monitored every stage of production. The technical specifications remained fixed across centuries. A solidus struck in 400 CE weighed the same and contained the same gold content as one struck in 1000 CE. This consistency required resisting 600 years of political pressure. Emperors faced invasions requiring immediate military spending. They confronted natural disasters demanding emergency relief. They inherited depleted treasuries from predecessors who had spent beyond revenues. In every case, the temptation existed to quietly reduce the solidus's gold content. Mint a million coins at 90% purity instead of 98%. Fund the immediate crisis. Deal with the consequences later. The Byzantines refused. Their refusal was not based on superior morality. It was based on calculated understanding of how monetary credibility functions. Trust accumulates slowly and collapses instantly. A currency maintains value because users expect it to maintain value tomorrow. This expectation rests on observed history. Every year the solidus held its standard reinforced the belief it would continue holding its standard. This belief made Byzantine gold more valuable than equivalent gold in other forms. Merchants paid premiums to receive payment in solidi rather than raw metal. Debasement destroys this accumulated trust in a single visible act. Once traders learn a currency has been corrupted, they assume further corruption will follow. They demand higher quantities of the debased currency. They shift to alternatives. The premium becomes a discount. Decades of credibility evaporate. The Byzantine emperors understood this asymmetry. Building trust required consistent behavior over generations. Destroying trust required one bad decision. The incentives favored extreme conservatism. They reinforced this conservatism through ritual and law. The emperor's personal involvement in monetary matters signaled their importance. Constantine VII, writing in the 10th century, included detailed instructions on currency standards in his manual for governing the empire. He treated monetary policy as equivalent in importance to military strategy and diplomatic protocol. The legal code specified punishments for monetary crimes with unusual precision. Counterfeiting was treason. Clipping coins was theft from the state. Mint officials faced audits backed by capital punishment. The bureaucracy surrounding the currency employed some of the empire's most capable administrators. This institutional weight created path dependence. Each generation inherited a system that worked. Changing it required justifying the change against 7 centuries of success. Bureaucratic inertia, normally a weakness, became a strength. The system resisted modification because modification had never been necessary. Anastasius demonstrated this institutional capacity in 498 CE when he reformed the copper coinage. The gold solidus served large transactions. Daily commerce required smaller denominations. Previous copper coins had become chaotic. Multiple types circulated at inconsistent values. Prices varied based on which coins a buyer carried. Anastasius introduced the follis, a standardized copper coin with clear denominational markings. The reform required recalling old coins, establishing new mint procedures, and educating the public on the new system. Imperial administrators executed the transition across the empire within months. This administrative capacity represented a structural advantage. The Byzantines could implement monetary policy because they possessed bureaucratic infrastructure to enforce it. Competing states lacked this capacity. Their currencies fluctuated because they could not prevent local officials from corrupting them. By the 6th century, the solidus had transcended its role as Byzantine domestic currency. It had become the monetary infrastructure of international trade. Arab geographer al-Muqaddasi, writing in 985 CE, documented what merchants across 3 continents already knew. Byzantine gold was acceptable everywhere. A trader could carry solidi from Spain to China and find buyers willing to accept them at consistent values. No other currency in the medieval world offered this universality. The solidus functioned as the medieval equivalent of the modern dollar. International contracts specified payment in Byzantine gold. Treasuries from England to Ethiopia held solidi as reserves. Merchants converted local currencies into Byzantine gold for long-distance trade, then converted back to local currencies at their destination. This reserve status generated enormous economic benefits for Constantinople. The city became the hub of a trading network spanning the known world. Goods flowed through Byzantine ports because transactions cleared most efficiently in Byzantine currency. The empire extracted fees from this flow. Customs duties, exchange commissions, and commercial taxes fed imperial revenues. The structural position was self-reinforcing. Merchants used solidi because other merchants used solidi. Network effects locked in Byzantine monetary dominance. Switching to an alternative currency required coordinating thousands of independent traders across dozens of countries. No mechanism existed for such coordination. The solidus remained supreme by default. Byzantine diplomacy weaponized this monetary position. The empire paid tribute to potential enemies in gold. These payments were not simply bribes. They were demonstrations of financial capacity. An empire capable of shipping tons of gold to foreign rulers clearly possessed resources beyond easy conquest. The gold payments bought peace more cheaply than military campaigns. The receiving kingdoms became dependent on Byzantine gold flows. Their economies adjusted to regular infusions of solidi. Their elites measured status in Byzantine currency. Cutting off these flows threatened internal instability. The Byzantines held financial leverage over nominal enemies. This leverage extended into commercial relationships. Byzantine merchants operate across the Mediterranean and beyond with structural advantages. They carried currency accepted everywhere. Their competitors carried currencies requiring conversion. Transaction costs favored Byzantine traders at every step. The arrangement persisted because the Byzantines maintained their currency's credibility. Every year, the solidus held its value, reinforced its network position. Every transaction completed in Byzantine gold added another strand to the web of commercial relationships centered on Constantinople. Foreign states recognized Byzantine monetary superiority and attempted imitation. The Arab Caliphate introduced the dinar as a direct copy of the solidus, matching its weight and gold content. This imitation was the sincerest acknowledgement of Byzantine achievement. The most dynamic economic power of the 8th century looked at existing monetary systems and concluded the Byzantines had solved the problem correctly. The dinar succeeded as a regional currency, but never displaced the solidus internationally. Byzantine institutional credibility had accumulated over centuries. The caliphate could copy the technical specifications, it could not copy the reputation. Merchants who had trusted Byzantine gold for generations required time to develop equivalent trust in Arab gold. Time eventually provided this trust. By the 10th century, the dinar circulated alongside the solidus in international trade. The Byzantine monetary monopoly had ended, but the Byzantine monetary system remained the template. Every successful currency in the medieval world followed the model Constantinople established. The solidus was more than a coin. It was a statement about the relationship between money and sovereignty. Modern governments treat currency as a policy tool. They adjust money supplies to influence employment, inflation, and economic growth. Central banks meet regularly to decide whether conditions warrant expanding or contracting available currency. Flexibility defines the modern approach. The Byzantines rejected flexibility entirely. They treated the solidus as a fixed standard that constrained government action rather than enabling it. The emperor could not fund a war by printing money. He could not stimulate the economy by increasing currency circulation. He could not quietly tax his subjects through inflation. These constraints forced fiscal discipline. Imperial budgets balanced because they had to balance. Revenue shortfalls required either cutting expenditures or increasing taxes. Both options carried political costs. Spending cuts alienated beneficiaries. Tax increases provoked resistance. The emperor faced immediate consequences for fiscal mismanagement. This discipline proved sustainable for 7 centuries because it distributed costs transparently. Citizens knew their tax burden. They could calculate whether imperial policies justified the extraction. The government could not hide spending through monetary manipulation. The system also prevented the debt spirals that destroyed other empires. Governments typically borrow against future revenues. When revenues fall short, they borrow more. Interest compounds. Eventually, debt service exceeds available resources. Default or hyperinflation follows. The Byzantines could not enter this spiral. Borrowing against future revenues required either repaying from future taxes or debasing the currency to reduce debt's real value. The first option faced political limits. The second option faced institutional prohibition. Byzantine emperors learned to live within their means because the alternative was unavailable. This fiscal conservatism enabled the empire's longevity. Byzantium survived invasions, plagues, civil wars, and natural disasters that destroyed other states. The empire possessed financial reserves accumulated during good years. It had not mortgaged future revenues to fund past consumption. When crises struck, resources existed to address them. The monetary system also protected ordinary subjects. Inflation operates as a regressive tax. It erodes the purchasing power of savings held in cash. Wealthy individuals protect themselves by holding assets that appreciate with inflation. Poor individuals hold cash because they lack access to sophisticated investments. Currency debasement transfers wealth from poor to rich. Byzantine commoners holding solida faced no such transfer. Their savings maintained value across generations. A soldier's pension purchased the same goods decades after his service ended. A merchant's accumulated profits retained their worth. This stability encouraged saving and investment. Economic growth followed. The arrangement reveals a principle modern policymakers resist accepting. Sound money benefits everyone except governments seeking to spend beyond their revenues. The Byzantine system succeeded because it prevented emperors from taking the easy path of monetary manipulation. Their subjects prospered because imperial profligacy had no hidden channel to extract wealth. In 1071, the Byzantine army met Seljuk Turkish forces at Manzikert in eastern Anatolia. The Byzantines lost. Emperor Romanos IV was captured. The empire's military reputation, carefully maintained for centuries, collapsed in an afternoon. The monetary consequences followed within a decade. The solidus had maintained 98% gold purity since Constantine's time. By 1080, it contained less than 10% gold. The most stable currency in human history had become nearly worthless in a single generation. This collapse illuminates the structural foundations the solidus had rested upon. The currency maintained credibility because the empire maintained strength. Military power backed institutional commitments. Death penalties for debasement meant nothing if the state lacked capacity to enforce them. Centralized minting required control over territory containing the mints. Manzikert destroyed Byzantine military credibility. Turkish forces occupied Anatolia, the empire's primary source of soldiers and tax revenue. Civil wars followed as generals competed for the throne. Central authority fragmented. Provincial officials operated without oversight. The institutional constraints that had protected the solidus for 7 centuries ceased to function. Emperors facing immediate military emergencies chose short-term survival over long-term monetary credibility. They debased the currency to fund armies. They debased it further to fund the next campaign. Each debasement made the next one easier. The network effects that had reinforced solidus dominance reversed. Merchants who had trusted Byzantine gold for generations observed its deterioration. They shifted to alternatives. The dinar absorbed transactions that had previously cleared in solidi. Italian city-states developed their own currencies to fill the vacuum. Constantinople's position as financial hub of the medieval world ended. The empire survived Manzikert by nearly 4 centuries, but it never recovered its monetary position. Later, Byzantine currencies stabilized at lower quality standards. They served domestic functions adequately. They no longer commanded international respect. The solidus had not simply been a coin, it had been a signal. It told the world that Byzantine institutions functioned, that Byzantine commitments were credible, that Byzantine power remained intact. When military defeat revealed these claims as hollow, the currency became hollow with them. This connection between geopolitical strength and monetary credibility persists today. The dollar serves as a global reserve currency because American military and economic power backs it. Sanctions work because exclusion from dollar-based systems imposes real costs. These arrangements rest on the same foundation the solidus once occupied. Perceived permanence enables actual function. The Byzantine experience suggests this permanence is always conditional. 700 years of stability created reasonable expectation of future stability. Manzikert showed the expectation was wrong. The currency collapsed faster than anyone would have predicted. Your currency rests on similar foundations. The dollar's reserve status depends on American institutional credibility, military capacity, and economic productivity. These factors have favored American currency dominance for 80 years. They have not guaranteed it permanently. The Byzantines believed their monetary system was eternal. They were wrong. Modern confidence in current arrangements may prove equally misplaced. The precedent exists. The longest-running stable currency in human history ended within a single generation of its supporting structures failing. Central banks study Byzantine monetary policy because it offers the clearest historical example of institutional design for currency stability. The lessons are direct. Credibility requires constraint. Constraint requires enforcement. Enforcement requires state capacity. Remove any element and the system fails. Modern monetary authorities have adopted Byzantine principles selectively. They maintain centralized control over currency issuance. They pursue price stability as a primary objective. They attempt to insulate monetary policy from political pressure through independent central bank structures. They have not adopted the Byzantine willingness to make currency debasement a capital crime. Modern central bankers face career consequences for policy failures, not physical consequences. The incentive structure is weaker. The constraints are softer. Whether softer constraints suffice remains an open question. The post-1971 era of fiat currency has not yet reached Byzantine duration. 70 years of relative stability does not match 700. The experiment continues. What the Byzantines understood, and what modern policymakers sometimes forget, is that monetary stability is not a technical problem. It is a political problem. The question is not whether a stable currency is possible. The question is whether political systems will tolerate the constraints required to maintain one. The Byzantine answer was yes, enforced by execution. The modern answer remains uncertain. Your savings, your retirement, your economic future depend on how current institutions answer that question. The Byzantine precedent suggests the answer matters more than you might expect. Their currency was untouchable for 7 centuries. Then it touched mortality. Now, every currency eventually does. The difference between a currency that lasts and one that fails is the strength of the institutions behind it. The Byzantines built those institutions with exceptional care. They maintained them with exceptional discipline. They watched them fail when external pressure exceeded institutional capacity. The structure they created defined monetary policy for a millennium. The failure they experienced warns every government since. Sound money requires more than good intentions. It requires systems designed to survive the worst intentions of those who will eventually control them. Constantinople's mints fell silent centuries ago. The questions they answered remain open. How do you build a currency people trust? How do you maintain that trust across generations? How do you prevent the inevitable temptation to sacrifice long-term credibility for short-term advantage? The Byzantines found answers that worked for 700 years. Modern central banks are still searching for answers that will work for 100. The gold is gone. The lessons remain. Every currency you hold descends from principles first proven in Byzantine Constantinople. Every monetary crisis since has rhymed with patterns first established when the solidus ruled the world. The 700-year currency that never failed eventually did fail. The failure taught as much as the success. Both lessons now sit in your wallet, waiting to see which pattern your lifetime will follow.